Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round.
Okay, I am so excited to have Chris Hutchins from All the Hacks on today. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm going to give a really quick bio, which might sound familiar because these are verbatim your words, in case you don't recognize it. So for those who don't know Chris Hutchins, now you know him. He is an avid life hacker, financial optimizer, and host of the award-winning podcast, All the Hacks, where he shares his quest to upgrade his life without having to spend a fortune. His passions have led him to collect millions of points and miles, be featured in a documentary on financial independence called Playing with Fire, which I frequently mention, and be covered by the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and much more. In his previous life, Chris was the head of new product strategy at Wealthfront after they acquired his company, Grove. Before that, he was an investor at Google Ventures, co-founded Milk, also acquired by Google, and built an organization called Laid Off Camp. Chris, I'm super excited to have you as our first official interview on Inside Out Money. So thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, I'd like to say sometimes I'm like, wow, you made me sound so good. But in this case, I made myself sound so good. So
You
I'm
did.
just patting myself on the back.
Yeah. And why reinvent a bio when someone else has already taken the time to write such a nice intro? I should just have the respect to read it aloud to you so you can remember all the awesome things you've done. And we're going to get into it later, but I'm kind of a fangirl of Wealthfront, just so you know. It was my first foray into investing a long time ago. Were you about to say you're a fanboy?
I don't work there, but I still have all my money there. So I am also a fan.
Yeah, nice. With a resume like yours, we could take this conversation in a million different directions. I really want to focus today's discussion on money as much as possible and probably some life optimization because I just can't help myself there and have a few questions to pepper in there. But I really want to focus in on money because, again, you talk about a lot of different things. And I heard an interview you did with Derek Sivers. And do you remember that?
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure you remember all your interviews.
I don't remember every moment of every one of them. But
Well,
of course.
in that one, Derek was talking about the paradox of choice. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of the financial paradox of choice, because I personally think the amount of content and advice out in the world today, it's fascinating, but it's also overwhelming. And it can result in people just having, again, a paradox of choice and too many decisions to make and not knowing where to start. And I often think about that financially. And so you've done all these amazing interviews. You've interviewed the best of the best across a slew of different industries and fields. What are the top pieces of financial advice that you think people should be following?
Okay, so top pieces of financial advice, they really string a lot of areas. And I've talked to a lot of people. And because I've also done some solo episodes where I guess I'm talking to myself, some of these might not necessarily, for the diligent person who wants to vet that I actually got this in an interview, maybe I'm wrong there. But I think the most important one is that personal finance and investing and saving is a lot of work. And a lot of people get caught up in trying to do something perfect and trying to make sure they're making exactly the right moves at the right time. So my favorite thing is just to automate everything. So instead of trying to figure and don't look for the perfect answer. So is there a perfect portfolio? We'll know in 20 years, but a portfolio that is aligned enough with what your goals are, whether it's 70-30, 71-29, like it doesn't really matter because we actually don't know the answer, but picking something and then automating it is like number one. So is that recurring deposits? Is that using some rule-based system in whatever financial app you might have that might say, if I ever have more than $10,000 in my account, sweep it here? Is that a personal rule that's like, I invest 20% of my paycheck after it hits my bank account? I don't care whether it's, actual technological automation or mental automation, but just setting rules and just not trying to make decisions later because you'll just stop. So that is one big one.
I love that. I think people often get caught up in the minutia of, again, the paradox of choice and in. There's a million different things I can invest in. There's a million different, which brokerage firm do I use, et cetera. And I always agree that just pick something and go with it. And I think that is a fantastic first piece of advice. I'm going to feel like all the others have to be that good now, Chris.
Oh, no. I started first. Another one is that I just don't think that people on the whole understand that in so many cases, renting is better than buying. And I feel like the advice we've all gotten from more people than not is that building wealth through real estate is this amazing thing. And so many people made so much money. And I don't think that building wealth through real estate is a necessity in any ways. And early on in life, I think trying to buy a home is probably not the best option. Now, I will say that for some people who aren't diligent about saving, buying a home forces them to save each month because they're required, in order to not get evicted from their home, to make contributions towards the principal of their home, which in 30 years they will have paid off, or however long their mortgage is. So for those people, it's great. But if you said, for every dollar I will spend a month paying mortgage, and by the way, for everyone who says renting is throwing away money, property taxes is throwing away money, repairs are throwing away money, HOA dues are throwing away money, mortgage interest is throwing away money. There are a lot of
maintenance.
Things. Yeah. There are a lot of things you throw away money on when you own a home. If you took every expense you had from owning a home, including the real estate agent fees, the closing costs, mortgage interest, everything, and you dedicated that exact same amount of money to rental housing and anything you didn't spend. And by the way, I don't mean go rent a bigger place because you now have a bigger budget. Rent the same size place and then invest all the rest. I think in the long run, the average person, will make more money in the investing case because just appreciation on homes isn't that much. The one reason why I think real estate has an edge or two is the tax advantage of being able to deduct some of your mortgage interest and leverage, which is you don't need, when you invest, you have to put $1 in to be able to invest $1. When you buy a home, you can put 20% down and buy the whole home. So if the home appreciates, if you put 20% down and the home appreciates at 1/5 the rate, you're going to get a 5x leverage on that appreciation and it'll kind of work out. But homes historically have not performed as well as the stock market. So I just don't think that it makes as much sense. But the big piece of it that doesn't make sense is the transaction costs of buying and selling real estate are very high. And if you amortize them over the life of the home, they work out. But people, especially young, don't need a house that is going to be as big as they might need or want 5-10 years from now. And so when you buy a home, you end up buying a home that either you will outgrow quickly or that you don't need for, 5-10 years. And if you're pre-buying a 3-bedroom house so you don't have to move in 5 years, but you only need a studio, you absolutely would have been better off renting the studio and buying the 3-bedroom house when you actually need 3 bedrooms.
The renting gives you that flexibility to keep changing without all those transactional costs along the way. But renting gets a bad rap. It has always, it's like, it's not a part of the quote American dream.
Yeah.
I love you reframing that for people.
Yeah. I think renting is great look, you can house hack your way to some of these things. So when we wanted to buy a house, we were like, we knew this. One of my favorite pieces of financial advice is like, if you're not going to live in a house for 5 years, don't buy it. It's just like, make it a simple rule of thumb. I love like rules of thumb that make things simple.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you have money and you're going to need it in the next 5 years, don't put it in the stock market, keep it in cash or something much more short term.
Yeah.
Or keep the majority of it in cash. So what we did was we bought a house and we rented out one of the rooms like a studio. We converted it to a studio because it had a separate entrance into that room, so that because we didn't need a 3-bedroom house, we wanted a 2-bedroom house, but we knew one day we wanted kids, so we were going to need 3 bedrooms. So we found a way to buy the house we would need in the future, but rent out and make money instead of just having space we didn't need.
That's a great house hacking.
If you could do that, great. But if you can't, I would have been much better off just renting a 2-bedroom place. And then when we need 3 bedrooms, upgrade to 3 bedrooms.
We did a whole Friends on Fire episode on how owning a home is essentially a lifestyle decision. And I think if you want to be in the area I'm in, it's really hard to rent. So if you want to be in a certain neighborhood, certain schools, whatever, sometimes your options are to buy a home. But financially, I think people get super caught up on feeling like I'm supposed to own a home and I'm not successful until I bought a home. And that, again, I think it's a lifestyle decision. And sometimes lifestyle decisions cost you more. But to your point, renting is actually often a better financial decision.
Yep. So that's one.
2 is even better than 1. So you're
I don't
moving
know
in the
about
right.
that.
I don't know. You're going steady.
I could do a whole episode on this. So I think I mentioned a couple in there, right? I like the rules of thumb that are just simple piece of advice. Like if you don't want to, if you need this money in the near term, don't put it in the market because it could go down. The age old obvious advice of like, just, by adhering to that, you're not going to sell when the market's down. It's like outsource your decision making, make an investment plan ahead of time. Here's how I operate. So you have something to stick to. Ramit Sethi has these money rules that I love where it's like, try to codify things that are hard for you to decide in the moment up front. So for him, this isn't going to be for everyone, but he's like, I only buy business class on flights over 4 hours so that when you're looking at the fares, you're not stressed out about it because you've just already made this rule.
Yeah.
He has one that's like, never question spending on books, appetizers, health, or donating to a friend's charity fundraising. Like easy. Like you create these rules so that in the moment when you're like, oh man, I'm checking out on Amazon fresh grocery delivery and normally strawberries are $4 and now they're $8. If you have a rule that's like, I don't shop around for grocery prices, then in the moment you're like, no, I've already decided that my personality does not, react to $3 price differences on produce.
Yeah.
And so you've said, I create a rule to allow myself to do that. So I like codifying things that trip you up that are a waste of time into kind of statements about yourself that you can rely on. Write them down. Be like, here's a note on my phone of like my money rules. And on the episode I did with Ramit Sethi, the first one, I've done 2, but the early one, we talked about money rules and how you can create your own. So that's something that I would suggest lots of people do.
Okay. What are some rules of thumb that have been influenced that were not necessarily your early personal rules of thumb, but that have been influenced by those that you have talked to in the last couple of years doing your podcast?
I mean, one that actually came from a conversation with Ramit was just setting a threshold. And this works if you're in a relationship, a threshold where like we don't talk to each other about purchase, and over time raising that. So for a while it was $100, then it was $200, then it was $500. And it's like, we just, instead of having this like, oh, did you spend this much on that thing? And even if it's out of curiosity, it always comes out accusatory. So we just had this thing where it's like, well, we have a rule. Like we are not going to talk to each other when we spend less than $200. And we are if we're going to spend more than that. So there's no surprises. So that was one that came out of a conversation. Brian Feraldi, I don't know if this is a rule as much, but we talked about investing and he buys a lot of stocks. And I think buying stocks gets an incredibly bad rap in the like financial independence community. And in general, like buying stocks doesn't outperform, but he does it in a way that I think is very different from everyone else, which is like he creates an investment checklist, he buys lots of them, and he only buys stocks he wants to hold forever. And I think his idea was, if you're going to buy stocks, create a checklist of what you look for in companies you buy. And so I just think that was really interesting because some people just want to do that. But if you treat it like a game, it's just not going to end up well. But if you treat it as something you're thoughtful about, you have a higher likelihood of ending up better. I don't buy a lot of stocks, but I thought that was really good advice for people who want to. I'm all index funds and like a few stocks from that. I don't think I bought a stock in years, but I think I've held on to some.
Well, speaking of stocks, you probably bought a stock through Wealthfront in years, right?
Yeah, I've bought, like Wealthfront automatically buys them, but I'm not picking a company.
Yes, exactly.
And making a bet on a company. But I think this is a really powerful thing. And I can't remember where it came from, but it's been a while since it was shared to me, or, I don't know where it came from. But a lot of us, maybe we've invested in something. Maybe you work from a company that gives you stock and you have some amount of concentration in your portfolio. So maybe you bought some Apple stock as a kid and it appreciated a lot. And now the majority of your portfolio is in Apple. And rationally, you're like, I want to get out of it, but you never want to sell it. And I always ask people to reframe it and say, what if you woke up and by accident, your brokerage firm sold all the Apple stock? And let's say it was $50,000. Now you log in and you've got $50,000 cash. Do you want to buy $50,000 of Apple stock? Don't think about, is this the right price to sell it? Don't think about any of that. Just ask yourself, if I had all this money in cash, would I allocate it the way it's currently allocated? Yeah. Almost inevitably, the answer is no. And so I use that principle to kind of get out of stocks that I don't want to be in, change my portfolio. But it's especially relevant. I still live in Silicon Valley, but I worked for a long time in kind of the startup world where people get paid in stock. And, we had clients at my last startup where they would say like, oh, 100% of my net worth is in Google stock. And we're like, that seems crazy.
Yeah.
Like if you had $100,000, would you buy Google stock only? And they're like, no, I would never do that. I was like, well, that's what you did. By not selling, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. So on that note, while we're talking about investing, I know you launched a company, sold it to Wealthfront, went to work for Wealthfront. Fun fact related to me, Chris, I don't even know what the word is, but I was scared. Scared's not the right word? I was late to the investing game. For someone who early retired at the age of 41, I didn't start investing in any real meaningful way until I was 36. And I actually did that with Wealthfront. And before that, I had been looking for a financial planner. I was just convinced, well, I need a professional to help me manage my money. And I was sitting on a lot of cash, and I was good about saving money, but I was terrible about knowing what to do with it. I just was a bit overwhelmed with all of the different paths I could take. And I thought I was constantly looking for the right professional to help me. Anyways, I found Wealthfront. I can't even remember how or why. I think my brother told me about it. And I started throwing money into Wealthfront, and I love it. And I still have money there and still put money into it. But I am very curious, if you were starting over again, or perhaps giving advice to one of your kids or something like that, would you put money in a Wealthfront type of, I don't know how you would even describe Wealthfront in terms of a, low fee. Would you do that, or would you go basic index funds, and why?
Yeah. So let's use the same framework that we just had. If I have, what happens if tomorrow, all of a sudden, I mistakenly sold everything in my Wealthfront account, and all the money that I had in Wealthfront, the day before, is now sitting in my bank account? What do I do with it? I would just transfer it right back. I would be really annoyed at the tax situation. But, when you try to decide how to invest, I think there are kind of three options. There are probably infinite number. But if you want to be a passive index fund investor, which is the strategy I employ, and I think I encourage many people to employ, though don't take anything that I say as personal investment advice, you can buy index funds. It's super easy. You just go open up a brokerage account somewhere, buy some index funds, no problem. I think to get the most benefit from your investing, you should regularly rebalance those index funds. And I think that if the market goes down and any of those index funds are at a loss, you would benefit from selling them at a loss and buying something similar, but not exactly the same, so that you could take that loss in that tax year, and for the first $3,000 of it, write it off your income and carry it over for as many years as you want, or use it to offset gains you have anywhere else in your portfolio, now or indefinitely into the future. Commonly called tax loss harvesting.
Yes.
If you want to and actually will do all that yourself, great. If you won't, then you probably shouldn't be doing it yourself.
So can I rephrase that to clarify? So for the rebalancing and the tax loss harvesting, which Wealthfront does for you as part of their low fee, Wealthfront wins in your book.
I think if I don't want to do that myself, because when I tried to do it myself, I found that I wasn't doing it consistently.
And you're actually pretty adept at doing it. A lot of people wouldn't even know how to do it.
Yeah,
you know how to do it, and you don't even really want to do it or stay on top of it.
Because it actually, it sounds so easy. It's like, okay, one thing's down, the other thing's up. But as soon as you have 4 index funds, you're like, okay, well, I need to sell this one. But when you sell something, sometimes it takes, how long does it take for that sale to process and the money to clear? And then you can go buy another thing. By then the market's moved a little, and you're like, ooh, did I actually buy the right amount to get to my even, 30, 30, 20, 20 portfolio? And then you're like feeling stressed because it was slightly off. And do you make another trade? And, when you're trying to tax loss harvest, the market's down. Do I sell today, or do I wait till tomorrow? Do I get caught up in my own head? Am I traveling today and I missed out on the opportunity to do something? It just seems like so many things to get in the way of my own self. So that's part one. Part two is there are a handful of things that I just can't do. So at a certain balance of account at Wealthfront and at other places, but I do it at Wealthfront, instead of buying the, total stock market index fund, Wealthfront will just buy all the securities in the total stock market index fund. And that means that you're not waiting for the stock market to go down to be able to capture losses. General Motors could go down and you could sell that at a loss and take some losses. So you have a higher ability to find losses to capture because you're buying 1,000 or 500 individual stocks. When you buy an index fund, you're doing the same, but you're not actually managing that. So in that regard, you actually can get more advantage there. So I think that, and Wealthfront does a better job of explaining this than me. You can go to the website. But if you look at the data, the performance that adds to your portfolio over time, unless you did all of it yourself, outweighs the cost. So it seems like a no-brainer for me. I don't even have to think about it. I don't even have to watch anything. I don't have to monitor anything. I have no idea in the last 5 days if the market's gone up or down. No clue.
Yeah.
But if I were trying to tax loss harvest myself, I would need to pay attention to that.
Yeah. It's funny that just to hear you double click on this directly, because sometimes I need to hear this directly from someone, but I heard you actually talk about this recently in one of your podcasts. And for me, I'm nostalgically still hanging on to a decent sized portfolio in Wealthfront, because that's kind of where I got started before I learned about the simplicity of index funds and things like that. But hearing that, I don't think I had given enough kind of credence to the rebalancing, the tax loss harvesting, and just Wealthfront does charge a fee that is higher than just buying individual index funds. What do you know the fee off the top of your head? head?
It's 0.25%.
That's a very low, reasonable fee too.
Yeah. And then I'll say this third option is if you are so overwhelmed trying to figure out how to invest your money that doing it yourself or even using Wealthfront, can't get you over it. So Wealthfront's doing it yourself is go do research. Using Wealthfront is answering some risk questions and I say will because I feel connected to the company, but they will propose a portfolio and say, this is the portfolio for the risk you've given us, execute on that as you will. If that's not enough for you, I think that the fee of hiring a, human financial advisor is worth it if that's the only way you're going to get over the hurdle to invest your money, because I think the long-term expected return of the market, even less a 1% advisory fee is better than the return you'd get not investing at all. So I think there is another option there, but I think for the vast, vast, vast majority of people, I think the portfolio that you would get, filling out a risk survey, which is there's not a lot of secretness, if you just Google like lazy portfolio, 3-fund portfolio, they're all pretty similar. And so I think that portfolio is fine for very, very many people.
Chris, I love the way you framed up even that third option of if your fourth option is that you're going to do nothing and not play in the market, then you're better off paying a 1% fee. Because I am one of many people, I know Ramit Sethi's like this and many, but we kind of hate on financial planners to some extent, but you're very right that is a very viable third option before you go to the fourth path, which is to just not play at all.
Yep.
So it's a good point. It's all relative.
So, I mean, we could probably keep going and going and going with other tips and financial tools and ideas and optimizing taxes and whatever, but I'm going to pause there because you just said top could be 1 or 3 and make sure there's not somewhere else we should go.
I love that. And thank you. I think those are perfect. And I think you hit many of the most critical things that I certainly think about, but put a little bit of a different angle and spin on it and a finer point, if you will, in many ways. I have a few random / personal questions I want to get into with you, Chris.
Okay.
So one is, I think this was the second interview you did with Ramit. He asked you what you like to spend money on. And I don't know if you remember, but you briefly said something about not very many things. And I'm just very curious to double click on that. And I'm curious if that is from a frugal mindset thing of like, that's how you are ingrained, or do you really just not care about stuff? What made you say you don't care to spend money on very few things?
I think it's both. I'm in my office right now and the bookshelf I have here is from IKEA and the TV is like the cheapest TV you can buy. It's like a TCL. It's not fancy. I don't put a lot of emphasis on having lots of really nice things unless they offer a lot of, better value or aesthetic or something. Like you're never going to see me like walking around with a Louis Vuitton wallet. Like it's just not me. So on one hand, like I don't know, I don't need a lot of things. I drive people crazy, especially my family, because they're like, what do you want for your birthday? And I was like, I don't know, like nothing. And they're like, well, do you have a list? And I was like, no, I don't have a list of things I want. I have a list of things I want. And then I just buy them. Like,
you're a grown man. You buy what you want.
Yeah. Like, and if I don't have the money to buy a thing, like I've just convinced myself that I don't need that thing. I don't have a lot of like wants, because if I can't afford them, then I just like, why want them if I'm not gonna be able to have them? And so there are rare exceptions to that. So for my birthday this year, I finally told my parents, because like the problem is they harass me with this question and I'm okay with that. But then they'll start harassing my wife and they'll be like, what does Chris want? Do you have any ideas? And it's stressful for her. So out of support for my wife, I end up coming up with things that are like things that I would never buy myself, but it might be fun to have. I don't know why. So I told them, I was like, get me an inflatable stand-up paddleboard. Like maybe I'll like, there's some cool places that I could use that. Maybe we could just rent one a couple times, but like, I don't know. So I don't have a lot of things that I'm like, my Amazon wish list is like, I don't know, like a couple board games that I'm just like, I keep there for these circumstances when it's like, and then my family's always like, yeah, we don't want to buy you another board game. I'm like, okay, well, the only thing that I actually want, you don't want to buy me. So it drives me crazy, but so that's part of it. And then the other part is, I think for anyone here who either has or will one day listen to my show, I love trying to figure out how to get a better deal on something. So when I say I don't want to spend money on a lot of things, it's because I'm like, okay, so I want to go to Japan and I want to stay at a really nice hotel. But if I play the points game, I can go to Japan and spend, $50 on taxes for a business class flight. And I can spend nothing for, a 5-star hotel with points. Now, obviously there's a trade-off. Like I could have just earned cash back. And so I want to be clear that I'm not staying for free, because the opportunity cost of those points was earning cash back. And that cash back would probably be, be, some fraction of that. Often the fraction is like 10% of it. So I'm getting 10 times more value by getting points than cash back, but it still feels free. And I'm just going to take it, even though I'm aware that it's not, but it feels free. And so that kind of transpires through all of this. So I'm like, okay, how do I get a better deal on a thing? So when I was in high school, I wanted pizza and I was like, what if I order a full pizza and then I sell 6 slices so that I get the other 2 slices for free? So you could ask me, do I like spending money on pizza? No. Do I like pizza? Yes. Do I want to eat it every night? Yes. Do I want to spend money on it? No.
I like it. So, I mean, that to me is very much a frugal hacking mindset versus I don't covet things. And I don't like, some people just don't want stuff, and that is a very different mindset than like loving a good deal.
Yeah. Although I did have this interesting conversation, who knows if it'll be out by the time this airs, with a guy named Light Walken. And he's a meditation instructor and he lives out of a backpack, but not a backpacker backpack, like the kind of backpack like a kid would take to school.
A knapsack?
Yeah. Like he lists all his possessions, which is like 20 things. There's like 1 t-shirt, maybe he has 2 t-shirts, a dress shirt, a pair of pants, a pair of shorts, a pair of shoes, a pair of sandals. That's it. He washes his clothes in the sink every night and it's very casual. And I was thinking about in that conversation, all the stuff in my closet. I was like, I probably own 30 dress shirts, but realistically, I would be fine with 2.
Yeah.
Why I have the other 28? I don't know. Like, I don't care about them. I never really wear them. I struggle to get rid of them. So in a way, like I don't yearn for more shirts. If anything, I'm starting to get to a point where I was like, Viore is a sponsor of mine and
I love Viore.
And I reached out to them because I love their products, not because they wanted to sponsor. I was like, can you be a sponsor? I don't want to talk about another brand. And like, in a way, I'm like, I would just like 2 black, 2 gray, and 2 white Viore shirts. That's it. Like, I don't need any other shirt. So I would less than the average person want things, but I also, for the things I want to spend less money on them than possible.
Makes sense. So one fun thing that's related to what you said about investments that I've heard people say about stuff that you might find interesting. So similar to how you said, if you woke up tomorrow and someone accidentally sold off all of your stocks, would you rebuy those stocks? On those 30 shirts, would you rebuy those 30 shirts?
No, I'd probably buy like 2.
You'd buy 2 of them, right? And they'd probably be Viore and okay. So your podcast is called All the Hacks and you focus on all parts of life when you talk about that, from travel hacking to life optimization to financial stuff. If you were forced to not do all the hacks and you just had to pick one topic, just let's say for a year to go deep on, what would it be?
I mean, this at the cost of sounding very arrogant, I'm like, I don't think I could spend a year going deep on anything. I think I would.
I don't think that sounds arrogant.
Well, the way I almost phrased it was like, I feel like I could get as deep as I need quicker than a year. It's like, there are things that it takes more than a year to master. And I'm not trying to imply that if I wanted to go deep on art, I could become the best artist in less than a year. But I'm a big fan of the Pareto principle, like 80-20 rule. So if you said, I'm forcing you to spend a year on only one thing, I'd be like, gosh, I feel like it's a poor use of time. And this was the part of the reason I started the podcast in the way I did. It started out being a parenting podcast where I was preparing for having kids and I was thinking about all of these things. I was like, man, I'm going deep on optimizing parenting. And all these parenting podcasts seem to be all moms. Let's do a dad parenting podcast. And then I realized that like my passion wasn't optimizing parenting. It was like optimizing like all the things. And then I realized that the audience of people who want to talk about optimizing a specific thing every single week is small. Yeah. If I talked only about optimizing parenting, like as a parent, I'm curious to hear ways to do better at my role as a parent, but I don't want to hear it every single week. Like that's just too much. And the things that I would learn on the 52nd episode are so much less important to my life than the first episode of another show about health or fitness or, work or my career or creating or finance or, a number of other topics. So I thought, gosh, and I'm a huge points nerd. Right? Like I love Points and Miles, but if you go to most Points and Miles blogs, and I love it because I say this example and sometimes there are examples where you're wrong. And so I try to prove myself wrong. Every time I'm looking at the Points Guys website, and there's an article today, everything we know about Universal Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights 2023.
That's super micro. Yeah,
it's so specific. It's like what it's like to cruise on MSC's first New York-based ship. I don't even know what MSC is, but it's a cruise company, I assume.
That's what happens when you have to pick one topic.
Yeah. American Airlines canceled our Q Suite, which is a Qatar Airways flight. Award tickets. What do we do? It's like these topics are interesting for a very, very small number number of people.
Yeah.
Which means unless you're a really, really crazy points and miles nerd, this is not a brand you're going to subscribe to. It's a brand that you might find because of SEO. And to be honest, like the points guy probably drives 90% of their traffic from SEO.
Yeah.
So
they're playing the long tail. They're literally trying to get all of those.
But I don't think that strategy works with a podcast because there's no discoverability. So to have a podcast win, you need to be able to retain an audience. And talking about any one of these topics specifically is going to be harder to retain an audience. It's also going to be harder to retain an audience because I will likely get bored of talking about them. In a way, and I have some creative ideas here, but I realized the last month of my show and the next month of episodes coming out, there isn't a lot about money. And I was asking myself, why? And I was like, I love talking about money. But I was like, what are the new topics? Because I don't really want to talk about investing again because I've already done that a few times. And like my investing strategy hasn't evolved. It's like, you want to know how you should invest your money? Go back and listen to the episode where I said what I did. And like, there's not much new there.
Yeah.
So there are always kind of new things. And I reached out to a friend of mine who, like you, has a podcast that's all about money. And she's done hundreds of episodes. And I was like, hey, can I just like trade you or pay you to just sit down with me and come up with like 10 more ideas of what's really interesting? Because I want to have the most impactful episodes on the topic of money. But at the same time, I don't want to just repeat myself. And I want to be excited about it because if I'm not, it's going to come through to the audience. So that's why I struggle answering your question, which is inherently like I started it this way because I didn't want to do anything for 1 year straight.
What I love is your answer is very thought-provoking and also like practical in a way. I was really just asking like, what topic do you love the most?
Yeah. And I would say like, right, if you, any topic I spent a year on would certainly become the topic I love the least.
Yes, that's fair. Okay. I like it.
I don't know. Right now I'm spending some time on health, which is really exciting, but I imagine a month from now, I'll be like ready for something new.
Yeah. Okay. I am very curious to hear your personal, like what is in your toolbox for how you organize your life day to day? What digital tools do you use, like online, offline, everything?
So I'm on a computer right now. So I can tell you right now I have a browser open. I use the Arc browser, which is a new browser from the browser company. And it's all built off Chrome, 90% the same, but a little bit more optimized. But like realistically, I don't know why I led with that because of all of the things I'm going to share, this is the least one anyone needs to go adopt that will add value to their lives. So let's just pretend I never said that. Notion is always open and everything is in Notion. So like I have a Notion for all the hacks. I have a Notion for our family. I have a Notion for myself. I have a Notion for the business side of all the hacks because it's a little bit separate. And I want everyone in the all the hacks one to just be able to access everything. And within each of those, there's literally so many things. Family project tracker, our house. Within the house, it's like all of the contact information for all of the people that we do, who provides our internet, who provides our water. There's travel. There's notes about questions my wife and I want to ask the pediatrician on our next kids appointment. It just goes, deep and everywhere. So Notion, hands down, everything. It is amazing and something I use all the time. For email, I don't know if I could feel good living without Superhuman. It's an interface that sits on top of Gmail. It makes email like 2 to 3 times faster and has so many amazing features. It is not free. So if email is not a big part of your life, it's probably not worth spending that money. But I find that the more I think about how much money things cost, the more I'm willing to spend money on them. So it's like, okay, Notion's $30 a month. It probably saves me an hour a day. That is like, even if it saved me an hour a month, it's a good deal. But so Notion, I don't think I could live without. What else? I just started using Slack for work, but I'm not going to call that like a life thing because unless you're running a business on it, I don't think it's that necessary.
Does Slack do things you can't do in Notion?
Notion is terrible for real-time communication.
Okay.
Like you want to ask a question to someone. I don't want to go write a comment on a page.
Yeah.
Like that just seems like too much work. For other kind of tools, so we already talked about Wealthfront, so I'll skip over that, put money in Wealthfront. I have a bunch of different credit cards and I've done so many episodes on them. That's how I travel for free, but let's skip that.
I'll put a link in the show notes. You did a recent episode where you talked about like your 4 favorite credit cards. I think that was good.
Yes. And by the way, for half of these, the way I operate on my podcast in terms of finding partners and sponsors is every time that I use a product and I love that product, I reach out to the company that makes that product and I say, hey, do you want to sponsor the podcast or be a partner or offer a deal to our listeners or anything? So if you go to allthehacks.com/deals and you can, it's funny, that was where I went to answer this question. So you said, what services do you use? I literally went to my sponsor page and now I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I forgot about 1Password.
Yeah.
Literally everything,
1Password,
everything's in there. Go down the list and I'm not going to hit on every single thing on this list. I don't want it to feel like it's just a giant ad. But I generally only work with companies and product that I use on a regular basis. Notion's a sponsor. And for almost every single one of these, there is a deal for the company on that page. So if you want to check it out, there's always a deal. deal.
Okay.
A few other ones. We already talked about Fiori, also spot. Like I feel like this isn't supposed to be a sales pitch, but a few other money related ones. One that actually, I did put it on the page actually, is a product that I think as people move up the net worth curve and they start to have more assets that they want to track, Wealthfront has a tool built into the product that's really great. You can sync things. If things get more complex and you want to do more with it, especially on the investment side, I think Kubera is a really cool option. But just to be clear, it's a paid service. And I think it costs $150 a year, but it's like I would say it's a very detailed wealth tracker. And so I'm logging into that daily. I'm looking now at all my bookmarks. I'm like, what sites do I log into all the time? It's like I log into Kubera all the time. And then I log into a bunch of work stuff all the time. I log into Nanit, which is our baby monitors all the time. Okay. Like I'm watching our children to make sure, are they actually going to sleep? And so, yeah, I'm trying to think what other, do you want to give me an area of life and I'll see if I'm missing something and I can throw it out there?
I actually love all of those, but I want to just make a point that I heard you make recently. So I am notoriously, for someone who can afford to pay for all of these things and does on some of them, I'm notoriously kind of frugal about paying for tools. And I don't remember which podcast this was on, but you were recently talking about, it was you or someone you were interviewing, but was talking about like these tools add immense value and efficiency and just like day-to-day value to your life. And I know for me recently, I have been thinking like, it's $30 a month, who cares, right? Of that's, one small meal out or something. And you use that example on Notion as an example, but just trying to change my mindset around things that make my life easier that I should be willing to pay for, and just getting past the hump of expecting like some of the best tools, they're not free. It's a business for someone, right? That's how they're making money. And if they are free, they're making
you want them
something
to work on it. Like you want them to work on these tools. I mean, one thing that I like to tell people, which if you actually end up doing this, let me know, but you can go sign up for any of the kind of gig economy job, Lyft driver, Postmates delivery, TaskRabbit, any of them. And then ask yourself, okay, how much time is this tool going to save me over a period of time? For Kubera, I can tell you that before I was using it, I was like managing a spreadsheet somewhere else. And how many minutes a year did I spend, importing and copying and pasting and all that stuff? And, even if your hourly rate might be higher than, what you would make on Lyft, but a lot of people come back and they say, well, but I can't just work more hours in my job, even though if I take my salary divided by hours. I was like, okay, let's take something where you can arbitrarily work more hours and make more money. And maybe for you, that's Lyft. Maybe you have some consulting freelance gigs and it's a higher rate. But if Superhuman saves you 1 hour a month and you don't think it's worth spending that, well, then just go drive for Lyft for 1 hour and see if you can make $30 or maybe 2 hours, and use that as a proxy. And that doesn't mean you actually have to do it, but I think you can at least find a thing where you can monetize your time. And at like, if you have, maybe it's $20 an hour, maybe it's 15, maybe for some people it's 1,000. Like, maybe you're a freelance lawyer and you could take on a few more clients. But once you establish a base rate of what you think your time is worth, or it actually is worth, you can actually go create money from it. Then ask yourself when you're making these purchasing decisions, whether it's going to, cost less than the time it saves you or the value it'll bring you. Keep in mind also that time unlocks the ability to think about other things in your life. And so we're not even factoring that in. So the Superhuman thing is, if you're going to save me even an hour a week, so now you're saving me 4 hours a month and it's going to cost me $30. So the ROI is great. We're not even factoring in the fact that what are you going to do with those 4 hours if I'm going to use those 4 hours to launch a new product, launch a new idea, do something different. I'll give you a concrete example. I have a spreadsheet that I've built for like looking at a lot of different credit cards. And so on that spreadsheet, it's like I put in 30 cards. You can go check them. You can tell it how much you spend and it'll say, here's how many points per dollar you earn. And if you say, well, what would happen if I added this card? It'll say you go from earning 2 points per dollar based on how you spend to 2.7. And that's going to, and then I have the point values in there and that's going to add $600 of value to your life. Wow. Okay. So I should probably get getting that card is going to add $600 a year. So I made this spreadsheet just for me. And the other day I was like, I don't know, I have an hour or two. What if I just cleaned it up a little, made a landing page for it and told people on the website or on the podcast, if they want it, they could buy it for whatever they want. $1.
Pay as you want.
So I put it up. And if you want to go watch this video, it's allthehacks.com/card value. And you can watch the video and you can pay what you want for this thing. Though someone did pay $100 and I was very honored to get that. That made me feel great. But if you're a member of All the Hacks for only $99 a year, you get it for free. So if you see it and you're like, this is worth more than $99, great. But just go do the membership and you'll save money. Even if it costs me money, I want you to get the best deal. But in the first 2 days, I sold, on average, people paid $4 and it was like 90 people spent it. So $422 right now. Okay. 422 divided by 30. 30, that's 14 months. A year of Superhuman has now paid for itself. And I know that it took me less time than amount of time I saved there. So it just, you forget all the things that can happen in your life when you give yourself more space to think about things. That could be spending money on tools. That could just be buying groceries without comparison pricing so you can get through it quickly, or just buying them online in the first place and spending money instead of spending 2 hours going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
If grocery store is therapy for you, great, go do it. But if it's a hassle, outsource it and save some time and use that time to do something else.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. You're inspiring me personally, and I hope many of our listeners also. Okay, Chris, I just recorded this episode with my husband on why we're quitting travel hacking. Do you want to talk me out of it?
I do, but first I want to know why are you quitting travel hacking? You got to give me a little bit more first.
Well, first off, quitting might be an aggressive term for it. We went hard and fast and did 13 or 14 cards collectively in a year, 1.5 million points. We are overwhelmed. It has taken the joy out of planning and booking travel for us. And it is just overcomplicated the booking and earning how we spend money is we're always trying to switch cards and it's making expenses. It's just everything's complicated. And then booking travel is also just a pain in the butt now. And it is just, we're just not enjoying it.
Okay. So I would say, are you going to start using a debit card?
No, we even before we did this, we're still going to be doing what I would call baby travel hacking. We will still put all of our purchases on credit cards. We will continue to earn miles, but it'll be on our core cards, like our Amazon Visa and our Delta.
Great answer here.
Okay.
So this spreadsheet that I just described, I went through and I added all the 14 cards that I have.
Okay.
And I learned that based on how I spend money, I earn 2.65 points per dollar. If I scaled back, I take this back. This is for the average spending household. So not my spending, but just Bureau of Labor Statistics average data. I put in all the 13 cards I have for the average family. And by the way, you could just check all the cards. It doesn't matter. And the average number of points per dollar you would earn is 2.65. If you just have an Amex Gold and a Capital One Venture X card, it's 2.49. Okay. So
close enough.
Rounding error, if you're not getting joy out of those other 12, 11, whatever number of cards, it's not worth the hassle. So one answer I would say is you can get almost all the value back to 80-20 rule with 2 cards.
Okay. I love it.
Depending on your spending and depending on, it might change which cards they are, but 2 cards, super easy. So let's forget that. I will say that you'll earn a lot more points doing the sign up bonus game. So, which is what you did.
Yeah.
And I think that is a lot of work, but it has a lot higher payoff because you're probably earning 20 points a dollar instead of 2. So, but I also think that everyone I've talked to that plays that game aggressively plays it for 18 months and then cools off for 18 months and then plays it for 18 months and then cools off. So just cooling off for 18 months is actually a part of the process.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better because I was people do this all the time. This is ridiculous. I'm not enjoying it. This is too
there's
much.
this guy who runs this company called Mile Method, and he charges, I think, $3,000 for an 18-month window to help you optimize your spend and earn 1 million points. And almost all of his clients are business owners who put a lot of money on their credit card. And I asked him, I was like, why don't you just charge an annual fee? He's like, because after 18 months, you need to take a break. You've opened up all these cards, you just need to take a break. There's not more cards that are worth opening. Some cards you can only earn the bonus after you wait a while. So he's like, by 18 months, we just take a break. So naturally you should take a break, and maybe in 18 months, it's different.
And by 18 months, Chase has cut you off also. So
yeah, exactly. So also there's travel hacking, chasing welcome bonuses. And then there's travel hacking, just using the optimal card. Yes. So that's one thing. You're going to keep doing that. We've already established.
Yes.
Get the 2 cards, 3 cards, whatever that match your spending. Keep doing that. So you're not quitting that. So then the question is, what do you do with everything you earn? Do you, redeem it as statement credits for 1 cent per point? Do you, use it depending on the card, like in Chase in the travel portal for 1.5 cents or 1.25 cents a point, and then just buy whatever flight you want? Or do you go through the hassle of trying to transfer the points to airlines and hotel groups and earn 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe more cents per point? And it sounds like that takes a little bit of the fun out of it, because you're like, I want to go to Japan with my partner and I can't get tickets through this way that's the most optimal. And so now you decide not to go. Well, if you're feeling that way, go back and listen to the episode I did with Bill Perkins, who wrote a book called Die with Zero, because I challenged him on this specific point. And he's like, what are you doing? You're not optimizing for the right thing. You think you're optimizing for getting the best deal. You should be optimizing for taking the trip. Yeah. And so the answer there is optimize for taking the trip and get the best deal you can for before the trip. Say, we're going to Japan and we're going to try to get the best possible deal we can to go to Japan. If you're really flexible, use a tool that lets you search for a year of availability and say, is there a time we can go to Japan that works?
Yeah.
Great, we can go then. If you're not flexible, then say, these are the dates we're going to Japan. What's the best deal we can get? Maybe you get 5 cents a point. Maybe you get 2. Maybe you get 1. But you're going to Japan. You're optimizing for the Japan trip.
Yeah.
So I think you could take it to extremes. And this actually happened. It's actually happening as we speak. My wife and I have 6 days without children. My parents are going to
just heard you talking about this. I, for some reason, thought this might have been like, I was actually curious if you've already taken this trip.
No.
I was like,
So
stressed for you. I was like, where are you guys going?
So we booked 2 tickets. We have round trip tickets to French Polynesia.
Okay.
And we do not have hotel. And I really want to
because they're all like booked up.
No, because they're so expensive and I'm still in the process of trying to see
you're holding out.
If there's some way to get a deal. But it's stressful. So right now, if you're, at a stage in life where you have 2 kids and you've saved some money, like your backup plan isn't a hostel because that ruins the whole trip. We want to stay at a nice resort somewhere on some island in French Polynesia. Like, does it have to be an overwater bungalow? No. But does it have to be like a nice resort that has room service and all the things? Yes, that's what we want. We're only going to take 6 days a year without our children. Like, that's what we want. And I think we're just going to pay. Like, we're just going to pay. We're not going to use, I'm sitting on a bank of 12 million points right now. We're just going to pay dollars. And because, I reached out to a bunch of hotels, they all shut me down. I was like, there are people with way more followers than you that we say no to. And I wasn't actually asking, funny enough, because we have a travel agency tied to all the hack, I was reaching out to be like, can we get a travel deal? And they thought I was reaching out to be like, can you comp my stay? I was like, I'm not trying to get a comp stay. I'm just saying, instead of me earning like a 10% agency commission, can you just give me a 10% discount? And one hotel said, we'll give you a 15% discount, but I can't book it in a portal. I can't use points and it's going to be super expensive. Anyone that just goes online and looks how much it costs to go to French Polynesia and stay at a nice resort, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're just going to spend it. And when we're going to call it like, look, I'm talking about it here. We're going to talk about it on the podcast. Maybe I'll call it a business expense because it's content and it really is. You've heard it on one episode. Now here's another, but we're not going to let the fact that we can't find a way to use our Hilton points to stay at a hotel, or we can't use our Marriott points to stay at a hotel to stop us from going on this trip. And one way we solved it was we literally just booked the flights and we're like, now we're going.
Yeah.
So like we have to do it. It's hard, like it's uncomfortable. I still haven't pulled the trigger. It's so easy for me to say, we're just going to spend, $1,000+ a night on a hotel, which is like 3 to 5 times more than I've ever spent on a hotel in my entire life.
If it makes you feel any better, because you've given me a lot of great advice here, Chris, I've spent $1,000 a night or more on hotels in maybe 5 situations in my life. They're all incredibly memorable. And you'll always remember this story. You'll remember that time your parents had this one specific week and it was short note, and you kind of held out thinking you'd find a spot and didn't or whatever. But like, in the spirit of Die with Zero, like you can afford to spend that money.
Yeah. And so we're going to do it.
Yeah. Your kids aren't like not going to college anymore. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be fine. It's just getting over like a hurdle, a mental hurdle of you're sitting on 12 million points and you love a good deal. So it feels weird.
And in this case, we got a good deal on the flight and we just didn't get a good deal on the hotels. And like, I'm just now okay with that.
Yeah. Well, and if the market dropped 10 grand tomorrow, you wouldn't even notice or bat an eye.
You make a very good point that I think a lot of people, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Ask yourself, this is a fun exercise, especially if you're married, because you have a way to actually test it. Go to your spouse and ask them to write down exactly how much money is in your checking account and your brokerage account and your 401k.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then go find out what it is. And you can even do it yourself. You can both try to guess. Make a game out of it. It'll be fun dinner conversation and see how close you were. And chances are you will be off by, let's call it, no matter how much money you have, 10%.
Yeah.
There are some of us who like, no, I check it every morning. I know exactly the amount. But I imagine across all of your accounts, if you sum it all up and say, how accurate was I on my net worth? It will be off by somewhere around 10% is my guess.
Yeah.
Which means that if you logged in and that 10% was missing, you might not have even noticed.
Yeah.
And so the point you were making was exactly that, which is if you're not going to notice if 10% of your money is gone, and for some people that number might be $100, it might be $1,000, it might be 10,000, it might be $1 million. Like it doesn't, everyone is different, but there are a lot of people where whatever that number is, I guarantee they stress out a lot more on like $3 at the grocery store for something that's not on sale or costs too much when they wouldn't even notice if a number 10, 100, or even 1,000 times as much was missing from their bank account.
Yes.
You bring a very good point, and we've committed to do it. It's just, so that's my pushback to you is if you're so comfortable with your ability to just spend money like that, well, don't stop collecting the points. Like you can always get a value of the points that I think on the whole is worth as much or more as getting the cashback card. So give yourself the optionality of, I have the point. Maybe I will use them in a way that's super optimal. And if I don't, it's okay.
I love the term optionality.
Yeah. So to go back, you're not giving up travel hack. hacking. You're just
Yes.
giving up like the rabbit hole, which I think I even have some data to prove like isn't even worth it in many cases.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
unfortunately, I don't know if you have to update the episode, but you're not giving up travel hacking.
Well, in fairness, the episode is titled, Are We Quitting Travel Hacking?
Oh.
And we get into how we're not really like fully quitting it, but we're going to take a,
You're not going as hard.
We're not going as hard. Yeah. We're not going as hard and fast as we did, which all started out as a competition on Friends on Fire anyways. So competition is over. We can end it now. Okay. Speaking of ending it now, I really appreciate your time. I found this to be an incredibly interesting and thought-provoking conversation. I think you dropped tons of little and big nuggets for people. And I hope all of our listeners have appreciated this. Also, I really appreciate you spending the time with us, Chris. What is the best place people can find you?
Yeah, I mean, everything I do is under the All the Hacks brand. If you're listening to a podcast, you could just search for All the Hacks. You can find the show. You can go to the website. You can subscribe to the newsletter. Like, it's all there. If you go to that deals page, you can find a lot of the companies we talked about today. So lots of options.
Okay. And I'll put a link and I'll put plenty of links in the show notes to a bunch of things that Chris has mentioned. And I just appreciate you taking the time to come on Inside Out Money, Chris. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you having the time to have me here and getting a chance to meet all these people and reach out. I'm around if anyone has questions.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Bye.